here we have an extension cable, which I'm just going to carefully place here, which is then plugged into here. This is ridiculous. Oh, God. Oh, all right, put it top of the list, guys. We need new electrics throughout the house. All right, let's get into it, shall we? I hope you don't mind. I do have a glass of wine. Promise you, it's that much Riesling, that much sparkling water. But I think we have a bit to celebrate, a bit to talk about. Let's talk through how we bought our house in Perth, Western Australia. So thank you so much for joining this video. I really hope this is helpful. So I'm going to go through our personal experience in buying a house in Perth. I, by no stretch of the imagination, am a real estate professional, a mortgage broker, anything like that. So obviously I'm sharing what I recall from our experience. So please do your own research in terms of mortgages, what you're eligible for, how the whole process works and things. Because I may get things wrong because this is just purely anecdotal. So just a little disclaimer there. All right, I will start by talking through our experience of how we found the house, what the Perth market is like, and just how it was for us. So last year we got married in August, had a couple of months of like, calm, and then me being me was immediately like, right, what's my next project? We had also got permanent residency in Australia in maybe May time. We knew that before getting permanent residency, buying wasn't really going to be an option for us. There are quite high stamp duty rates. I believe it is a 7% stamp duty surcharge for foreign buyers. And if you are on a temporary visa or you're buying from overseas and you're not living here permanently, then you do have to pay that extra 7%, which is obviously a huge amount. And I believe you also have to seek permission from the Foreign Investment Review Board to actually make the purchase. So it just wasn't really something which we were, and also we were in the middle of wedding planning. So one thing at a time, we decided to put it off until after we got permanent residency. So what started as being just going to a couple of viewings each weekend, and the way it works here, they're all home opens. It's very rare these days to actually have a one-on-one appointment with the real estate agent and go around the house. It's all home opens. So it went from being a couple of them a weekend where we would just go in and be like, no, we're just starting to look. And then very quickly we realised, oh my God, this is pretty serious here. There are countless people, so maybe 20 to 30 people at each home open. Overall, we viewed 60 houses. That's how many I went through my calendar and checked how many appointments we had, and it was 60. So we got an idea in our minds of the kind of houses that we wanted, and that list of criteria got more and more vague. In some ways we refined what we wanted. So initially we were like, oh, well, maybe we're not that bothered about a garden, etc., etc. And then we actually really thought about it and went to more of these houses and thought, actually, no, a big garden is going to be what we need. And there was a bit of reassessing our priorities, I suppose, through that process. We started looking in September and we managed to find a place in February. So not that long in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like a lifetime because every single weekend we would spend probably 5 hours of the weekend going to home opens, going to these houses. We offered on 9 houses in total, changed our budget 3 to 4 times, increasing it each time. And we also changed our criteria in terms of, did we want a completely done house? Did we want a doer-upper? Did we want something in between? And essentially it boiled down to, we'll take what we can take. It wasn't until we increased our budget one step further than where we thought our top was that we managed to find the house. So for us, we were hoping for a kind of stepping stone house. We were hoping to be in whatever house we were able to buy now for 3 to 5 years. What we've ended up doing is stretching ourselves, hopefully for a longer term purchase. Hopefully it will work out for us, but at the moment we are tightening our belts and just living with it as it is for the most part, other than a bit of redecoration and things like that, and not really going for a full renovation because we just thought, in the market the way that it is at the moment especially, going for a house that was going to be a full renovation, we thought was going to be a bit of a challenge for us. We don't really have any skills ourselves to speak of, like we're not very hands-on. I have a clear idea of how I want things to look, but neither of us are especially handy with tools, or definitely not plumbers, electricians, anything like that. So we would be relying a lot on trades, and in Perth at the moment, I mean, I'm a construction project manager, I see how hard it is, and even more so for residential. I think people are really booked up, it's difficult to get anything done. So we're trying to kind of pace ourselves a little bit, and when we do things, do them properly. So get a company in to do the full kitchen rather than bits and bobs. We're totally off topic now, but yeah, that was part of the criteria that we were looking for. Okay, so the process. So yeah, we went to all of these home opens, found out about these through Domain and Real Estate, and signing up for, so choosing the criteria, so the size of house, the location, and turning on alerts. So they would come through every time a new property was listed. I would get a notification, I would check it and say, yep, there's a viewing on Saturday, okay, I'll go to that, add to calendar, doing that. And then once you've built up a bit of a rapport with the real estate agents, you end up seeing the same ones every week, then they might ring you with some that haven't quite made it onto the market yet. Or, you know, if a sale falls through, then they might call you and say, hey, I know you were interested, are you still interested in that particular house, and things like that. So that's how we found the house. In the meantime, we got onto our mortgage broker, so I'll put his details down in the description box. If you are buying in Perth, I would highly recommend him. He was absolutely fantastic. So Empowered Finance really helped us. They gave us a lot of information. He was very knowledgeable about the doctor aspect and the medico waiver and things, which I'll get to later, but he was really good with things like that. So we got in touch with him, prepared everything before we'd even found a house. We went through all of the documentation with him, made sure that got an understanding of how much we could borrow in total, played around with different loan amounts versus deposit amounts. He explained all of the kind of waivers and things like that we were eligible for. And ultimately we got to a position where we were able to get a pre-approval in place. So we offered on, as I say, 9 houses. So a few of those we didn't have the pre-approval in place because it just went too quickly before we were able to actually apply. And then we went, right, let's take a step back, let's have a couple of weeks off, prepare the pre-approval, because you can offer without the pre-approval, it just strengthens your application. Or you can, proceed with the pre-approval, which in England is the same as having the mortgage in principle. So going to the bank and saying, here's all of our pay slips, all of our credit cards, all of our existing loans, etc., etc. This is who we are, how much money will you give us? Then they'll say, yes, in principle, we'll give you this amount. And then you'll take that and put it with your offer and say, look, we offer X amount, we've got pre-approval to this amount. There's a questionnaire to fill out, and you'll say, this is what our offer is and these are our conditions. So we want to, and we always said, because we were in a flexible position with renting, and we wanted to make our offer as appealing to the sellers as possible, we would say basically, here's our offer, here's our deposit, we will settle at any day to suit the seller, basically. Just you tell us what you want and we will make it happen, sort of thing. Once you have your offer accepted, then you pay a deposit, which is not your full mortgage deposit, but it is a deposit. So generally I think it's $20,000 or $30,000, and that goes to the estate agent, so you pay that up front. If you then pull out of the sale, that is when you would lose that money. So it's different to a mortgage deposit. So this is where you can't put offers on 2 houses, because if they both got accepted and you put in the deposits for both, then you would lose one of them, I believe. So we wrote a letter that was basically saying, like, dear homeowners, we're writing to personally communicate our offer of X amount. Just to introduce ourselves, we're Jake and Kat. Jake's a doctor, Kat's a project manager. We're a young couple, we've just got married, we absolutely adored your home, we came to view it and we loved this thing about the local area, we loved the parks nearby, we loved the schools, we can really imagine our future family growing up in the house and in the garden, and you know, just really creating that story. And it did, genuinely, we would change it for every single house that we bid on, but it's really, for some people, they would look at it and go, but your offer is 100 grand less than the next person. Fine, we're not going to win that. But with this particular home, it had been lived in by the couple and had their children growing up here for, I think, 15 years or something. And the top bidders were ourselves and an investor from over east who just wanted to buy it and rent it out. And I think our offer was slightly lower. However, we had our finance in place, so we had the pre-approval already. And then we also had this lovely letter, which really added an element of personality to us. And then they don't have to use their imagination. They can really picture in their minds, okay, who's going to be living in this house? Do we want a load of renters? Do we want it to be, because there is a massive issue at the moment in Perth with shortage of houses and people from, and I'm definitely not saying that, I mean, I'm not Australian either, but there's definitely a thing with foreign investors just snapping up houses, and a lot of people don't want that. A lot of people want their houses to go to families rather than just this anonymous investor. And we found that was a bit of feedback that came back from the estate agent, that really helped to swing the dial for us. So definitely recommend, if you're trying to, and if you're in the same position that we were, where you're bidding on house after house after house, then potentially think about writing one of those letters and really appealing to the sentimental side of these people. So then once the offer is accepted, then the broker will apply for the mortgage loan on your behalf. So your offer is subject to finance, and then you apply for the finance. So if you've done the pre-approval bits, then the information should be pretty much already there. So once the mortgage loan has been applied for, then it obviously gets approved or declined, hopefully approved. If it gets approved, then you get your loan approval letter, you appoint a settlement agent, they do all of the paperwork bits, you get the pest and building inspections and any other inspections and surveys and things completed within that time. And then you agree a settlement date. So it's generally 14 to 21 days after acceptance. The settlement can take longer than 14 to 21 days, but that's the shortest amount of time that it takes. And finance approval is generally, I think, 14 to 21 days as well. So you're looking at 4 to 6 weeks, basically, all in. So for us, let me talk you through our timeline, because it was ridiculous. We had whiplash from the how quickly it went. I went back to the UK to visit family. My sister had just had a baby, so I went back to the UK to visit family, and we were like, right, let's have a couple of weeks off house viewing. We'd seen this house on the market. Jake had gone to see it and absolutely adored it. We rang them up and said we would be looking to offer X amount, and they said, oh, no, you're going to need to up your offer by 200 grand more. We were like, okay, right. And then they said, there's no point in even offering if you're going to offer around that region, just don't bother. We've already got people interested in it for X amount, which is 200 grand higher, so don't even bother. And I was like, oh, dagger to my heart, because I'd seen the photos, we hadn't even seen it in person, but I knew that I loved it. But I was like, right, whatever, is what it is. Tootled off to the UK, and then I got a notification on my phone, this is back on the market. And I was like, what? And I was calling Jake, you need to get there immediately. Turns out it was an investor who was trying to buy it, their finance had fallen through, so it was back on the market. So Jake comes to view it again and is like, no, it's got such a nice homely feeling to it, we have to go for it. So he takes 2 videos, sends them to me, is like, do you like it? Do you want to buy it? And I'm like, yes, go. Not that it's, the biggest purchase of my life or anything, or somewhere that I'm potentially going to live for 15 years. Just go for it. I've never seen it, but I trust you. It must be nice. So he did. We put in an offer that we really talked about it, did all the spreadsheets and went, right, this is terrifying, but let's just do it. So we put the offer in with the letter, got it accepted. That was on a Sunday. Our mortgage broker, incredible man, put in the application Sunday night. Monday morning, it gets approved. I fell off my chair. It was ridiculous. Yeah, it literally took 1 day for the mortgage to be approved, and then for us, settlement was 14 days. It's so funny, 14 days after the mortgage approval. So basically we put in the offer and 2 weeks later we had the keys in our hands. So yeah, absolute whirlwind, and completely different to the UK system, where it can be 6 to 9 months of negotiating and chains, and yeah, completely wild. Okay, so we had to get out of a rental to get into this house. So for that, just briefly touching on it, so we had to break lease, which means that so our lease was up in July. It was a rolling yearly lease that would have been up in July. However, we wanted to get out of it early, so obviously we didn't have to be paying the rent and the mortgage. To do that, all you have to do, and especially in today's market, it is easy peasy. Basically, you're responsible for all costs up until the landlord being able to secure a new tenant. So you're responsible for the marketing costs, and you're responsible for the rent until they can get a new tenant in, basically. The idea is the landlord shouldn't be out of pocket if you've terminated the lease. So once we knew that settlement was impending, we messaged the landlord and said, look, how long do you want, how do you want to do this? So he listed the property online. We had to pay those fees, which from memory were about $250. And we had home opens that weekend, and then they found tenants very, very easily because the market is mental here. Okay, so some of you on my moving vlog, if you haven't seen it, I'll link it up above. Some of you asked a few questions which I will answer now. So, house deposit. So how much generally should you aim for a deposit? So generally they expect a 20% deposit. However, for doctors can put down as little as a 5% deposit. And that is because obviously all professionals have very stable jobs, very good incomes, and because of the amount of time spent training, mortgage lenders recognise that and recognise the fact that not many people will be training for that long to be a doctor and then, you know, retrain to become something else and come out of that profession. They're basically very reassured about the safety of their money in your loan. Does that make sense? So there's a couple of things which benefit doctors in particular. If you're new here, my husband is a doctor, so we benefit from a couple of things. So there's the 5% deposit, and then there is also something called a medico waiver. So I'm just going to get my iPad so that I can reference precisely what this is. So LMI is lender's mortgage insurance. This protects the lender from the buyer defaulting on their payments. So doctors and other medical professionals get this waived. Generally, other people, if they are putting down a deposit less than 20%, they would have to pay this lender's mortgage insurance. Even though it protects the lender, the lendee still has to pay for it. However, the medico waiver means that this is waived for doctors. For most people, putting down a deposit less than 20% isn't worth it, because then they would have to pay for this LMI, so this insurance, and then that negates any money that you would have saved by putting down a lower deposit. However, for doctors, this is waived, so that is something which we very much did benefit from. There's a couple of other schemes and things which are helpful. So there is a first home buyer scheme. This is the concessional rate on stamp duty that you get. So, and I think this is specific to Perth, so maybe check if you're looking elsewhere in Australia. So for properties under $430,000, you pay 0% stamp duty if it's your first home. Then there's a concessional rate, so it's a lower percentage than the normal, between $430,000 and $530,000. And then the normal rates apply above $530,000. I've put a link in the description box below, just in case you wanted to refer to that. To my understanding as well, you can be eligible for this if you, don't quote me on this, if this is your first house that you've owned outside of the UK. So even if you owned a house in the UK and then are buying a house and it's your first house that you're buying in Australia, to my understanding, you can still qualify for the first home buyers grant. Do not quote me on that, because I don't know if it's definitely true, but it's definitely worth checking. And then there is also a first home owner grant. So the other one was first home buyer, the second one is first home owner. and this is on new homes or homes that have had like very substantial renovations. It's a one-off payment of $10,000 or up to. And again, this is something that you can only be eligible for if it's your first house, if it's a new one or a substantially renovated one, up to the cost of $750,000 in Perth. And it's apparently not means tested, so that's great. Somebody has said, would you go for a broker or direct to the bank? So my advice would be go to a broker, because then they can compare the rates at different banks. And it was a situation, forgot about this, we had a ridiculous situation where Jake's credit history, despite only being here for like 2 years, I don't know how this managed to get so muddled, but it had somehow merged with someone with a very similar name, and so it merged the history. So when we went for pre-approval, we got declined because it said, sorry, you already own a house, you can't afford another one. We were like, what? I was like, Jake, what have you been hiding from me? So we had to spend a while untangling that. And through that process, we ended up trying to go for a mortgage with one company, and then we had to move to another company and then another company. I think if you were trying to go direct to the bank, you would have kept hitting the same roadblock on that particular issue anyway, whereas the broker was able to advise us. So for that reason, I think that it definitely is a benefit to going to a broker who's able to go to a few different companies and give you that slightly more impartial advice. I personally found that with our broker who we went with, he was contactable on WhatsApp most hours of the day. Like if I had a question, I could shoot it through to him like he was just my mate, and would get a really quick and thorough response. He was extremely helpful. And I don't know if you get that level of service from an in-bank representative. I think you would end up being, you know, directed to call centres and things like that. So for that reason, I would go for a broker. Someone else has said, do you need much renters experience to get a mortgage here? So I don't believe so. They didn't ask us, other than our residential history, which I think is more of an identity check type thing. That wasn't, you didn't need references from previous landlords or anything like that at all. So I wouldn't say that's something that you should worry about. All right, I think that answers everyone's questions so far. I'm sure you're going to have millions more. So maybe pop them in the comments below, and similarly, if you're someone who has lots of knowledge, pop it in the comments below, and like maybe help each other out answering questions and things like that. I'll try to jump in wherever I can with my insights and input if I can. But yeah, I am so glad to finally be in a house. I feel so fortunate that we have, you know, we came to the end of our journey of trying to find a house. It is scary. Perth does genuinely have a, sorry, I'm gonna leave this on a really dark and dour note, but Perth has a housing shortage at the moment, and the rental market is absolutely crazy, and the housing market to buy is pretty cutthroat. You have to be willing to cough up a lot more money than you think the houses are worth. But hopefully there is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I know for us, we kept persevering, and yeah, eventually we managed to find something. So I'm really crossing my fingers and toes for you that you're able to do the same, and I hope that this was really helpful to give you a bit more insight to the process. And yeah, please follow along. We will be definitely doing some renovation stuff down the track. We want to do a garden reno. We desperately need a new bathroom and ensuite because they are like 20 years old and falling apart, and we also really want to do a big kitchen diner reno at some point, but that will be a lot of money away. Let's say that. But yeah, and in between we'll just be living our lives, and I would love to document it on YouTube for you. So keep watching, let me know what you want to see from me, and I'll see you in my next one. Thank you so much. Bye.